thanks for joining us for this part of the segment. And at this time, we're looking at the world of political science and political marketing. And we know that especially the latter is something that we have not averted our minds to, especially in the Fourth Republic. But especially when you go to countries in the more developed democracies, in Europe, the United States, and elsewhere in Latin America, who manages campaigns is critical. It doesn't matter, or it doesn't have to be somebody who is a member of a political party. It's really somebody who has the expertise, the strategy to come in and execute their job and go back. That person can even, well, based on that person's own work ethics, decide to go and even work for your next opponent. But they do it not only for the money, but because they are good at what they do. But we're here to discuss a lot of dynamics in our current political landscape. And we'll be having in the studio, possibly, Dr. Ali Duseidu with the Political Science Department of the University of Ghana. But currently in the studio is Dr. Kobi Mensah. And he is a tutor in marketing, a professor of marketing at the University of Ghana Business School. And thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
And
he has... The professor is too big for me.
No, that's what they say in the United States. In the United States, they say, oh, you're a professor. In Ghana, of course, people have a problem. But he's Dr. Kobi Mensah, but he's a professor of marketing. It just means he's a teacher of marketing. And so he has written this book, fantastic book. He was my lecturer, though. So, it says Political Marketing and Management in Ghana, a New Architecture. And that's from Kobi Mensah. Okay? And you, of course, you can get this on, you just Google it on Amazon, etc. And you can get Palgrave Pivot. I think they are the publishers.
Yeah.
All right.
Macmillan.
Well published. What?
Thank you.
This one is not a Newtown publication one. So this is a good one. Please try and Google it. Political Marketing and Management in Ghana. But thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Roland.
You were making news the last week or two about a policeman having slapped you.
Well, that was an unfortunate incident.
What happened? Tell me.
Yeah, I had actually gone to, kind of see a colleague researcher. I mean, they were in a team of researchers that came from UK. Part of the team had departed on Friday, so the remaining were going on Sunday. So I'd gone to see him off, and in the process of kind of getting the baggages and the luggages from the car, and then getting them onto the trolleys, I had a policeman approach me and said that we had been there for long. I mean, in the ensuing process, there was that assault, which I should say that the leadership of the police have been fantastic, to be honest. Gradually we're getting to the bottom of the issue. So maybe I may not have to elaborate on it. Let me be fair to them. They've been amazingly fantastic. And I hope that, the kind of interaction they've had with me, it would extend to the other, people, I mean, the entire citizenship. I think that was the aim, making sure that people can speak up when they have been unfairly treated. And then also the police force, police service would actually recognize the dignity that every Ghanaian deserves, and therefore be handled in a proper way. But let me congratulate the leadership, of the police. I mean, those at the airport, they've been fantastic. Yesterday I was there with them, with my lawyer Tanko, and they were so good at what they were doing. So gradually we're getting there, and I hope that the public education actually.
Okay, so you just wanted to draw the attention of the public.
That's correct.
That's why you made noise. I said, right. Wow, why as a papa? But at the end of the day, we know that the president is just at the UN, just addressed the UN General Assembly, etc. But invariably, it's also because he's gone through a tortuous journey of campaigning. Yeah. Just in 2016, but before then had tried in 2008, failed, 2012, etc. And we'll take some soundbite from him, and then we'll come back, we'll speak to his participation in the UN, and we really, when we say we want to sell Ghana, the geopolitical ways are the best way to go. So we take some of the assets from the president and his address in the UN.
We believe it is time Africa comes of age and holds its rightful place on the world stage. This Africa will be neither a pawn nor a victim. This Africa will be honest to itself and to the world, and this Africa will shed its cloak of poverty and become prosperous. We are any illusions about the hard work that it will take to achieve our stated goals, but we are not afraid of hard work. We know that a critical ingredient in making sustainable economic progress is to ensure a stable democratic system of governance. I believe we're making this progress in Ghana. After years of political turmoil and the accompanying economic chaos, a consensus has emerged in our Fourth Republic. We've had political stability for the last 25 years under a multi-party democracy where regular elections are now an accepted feature of our governance. We want to build a Ghana that will enable our people to deal with the rest of the world on an equal basis. I say nothing new when I draw attention to the urgent need to reform this organization. It has been talked about and scheduled for a long time, but somehow we've never found the courage and the will to reform the United Nations. Ghana supports the process of UN reform, especially of the UN Security Council, as set out in Africa's common position on UN reform, based on the Eswatini Consensus. The time is long overdue to correct the long-standing injustice that the current structure and composition of the UN Security Council represent for the nations of Africa. We cannot continue to preach democracy and fairness around the world. We cannot insist on peace and justice around the world when our global organization is not seen by the majority of its members as having a structure that is just and fair. It is indeed seen by many as helping to perpetuate an unfair world order. This organization provides the best vehicle for the world to manage its many varied problems, and we would undermine its credibility and fail in our duty if we do not reform the United Nations. We dare not let ourselves and future generations down. The time for reform has come.
And the president calling on world leaders to be courageous enough to undertake massive changes in their respective countries, but also in the UN setup, in order to address imbalances in the current geopolitical system. And we know that he also said Ghana's economy was being developed in such a way that the inclination and people's appetite being whet to make sure that they go through helter-skelter and they brace all odds, go through the deserts and then across the Mediterranean into Europe will be reduced. But it's far from reality for many world leaders. But Dr. Mensah, when it comes to the subject of how we have to make world leaders listen to us, I think that apart from Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, we've not had a lot more of leaders in Africa being listened to around the world.
Yeah, I think it's as a result of the roles that we've played. You know, obviously, you want to actually think about your immediate environment. But you know, Nkrumah started on a global scale. I mean, his geopolitical, you know, awareness was very high right from the beginning. You know, it was because of his activities, geopolitical activities. That's why he was even brought into UGCC. I even wonder why certain political leaders didn't know about Nkrumah before he came, because he was very big on the global stage. You know, this is a guy who was actually championing African liberation in the US, then in the UK. So on the global scale, he was known already before he came down to Africa, or he came down to Ghana, which means that when he mounted the UN stage, it was a done deal, so to speak, because he knew the issues, he was aware of the issue, and he articulated the issues at a global level that is very persuasive, that was very persuasive. So I think that, yes, one of our failures had been that we hadn't been able to talk tough, especially when it comes to the global issues. And I think that's the reason being that we have, over the years, depleted our resources, we have depleted our capacity. And once you deplete your capacity, you recoil into your immediate domain because, I mean, if you don't have the money, how could you actually stand on a global scale? You can't. But of course, Nkrumah had that capacity because the country was buoyant, politically, economically, the country was solid. Even military strength, we were there. And if you meet some of the old, guys, which I was fortunate to have my own, godfather, Baba George, who's in the UK, he used to tell me, he said, look, in Congo, the Ghanaian army was so fantastic that at the global level, wherever you go, everybody recognizes the contribution Ghana was making, at a global scale. So we haven't been able to make that impact ever since Nkrumah left because we have kind of retreated, to our corner. We have retreated to our corner because we have lost that capacity, the ability to speak on the global stage. We have lost it. So I think that, yes, for us to come back into the space, we probably have to develop, our economies very well. We have to have education top-notch. We have to make sure that our military strength is up there. Then we can actually make a lot more impact at a global stage. But at the moment, we don't have the capacity because we have actually left things to ruins, and I think that's very unfortunate.
Is it about the individual heading a respective country, or it's the country in itself? And I give you an example. You look at Nigeria, its might, oil, getting boom in the 70s, its population, it's huge. So you don't necessarily need a fantastic leader of Nigeria to make Nigeria big. But you take a small country like Ghana, it means that the personality will have to count?
Of course, yeah. When it comes to political strategy, and of course, including global stage, all the three, especially the three key things, the personality, the country itself as a if you take it as a unit of a political unit, and of course the kind of policies you're actually championing. If you take these three, they actually count a lot. So you may have fantastic policies and it will go global because of the things that you're doing. And if you look at what Nkrumah was actually doing, the key factor, which is liberalizing the entire Africa, it was a global seller. You understand? Because for you to sit in Ghana, a very small country, and say we are liberalizing, we are fighting for liberation for the entire African continent, that's a massive policy, all right, that actually goes beyond every boundary. Two, he was charismatic, and he knew the issues, on a global scale. He knew the issues right from his own Africa to the Asias and then to the Europes and other things. So you've got to be very aware of geopolitical issues and be very articulate of those issues. And then Nkrumah had all that. So you could actually look into that as well. And then, of course, Ghana as a party, as a country, was a star, as we keep saying, of sub-Saharan Africa, So you need to have these three things actually going for you. But of course, the person to articulate, the messenger, is very crucial. And Nkrumah was very much, that kind of, personality to actually articulate that. Of course, no doubt, Nana Akufo-Addo is a fantastic orator. He's a fantastic, articulator. And I'm sure that if the country was on a good footing, or if the country can actually be taken to a very good foot, we would be able to make that impact that perhaps Nkrumah made. Of course, I wouldn't say that it would be near Nkrumah, though. I would be a little bit reserved on that one, as other people have articulated. Yeah, I think he hasn't gotten to Nkrumah stage.
Yeah, because for what the president is calling for, we need a drastic change in the UN system. It's something that Donald Trump had also re-echoed just a day or two before the president addressed the U.S. But of course, Donald Trump resonates. So it means that as a person, just like Nkrumah, you need to be provocative. You need to go against the grain. Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, you have to display a very huge intellectual, ability. And of course, Nana has it. Now, but also you need to come from a position of strength, i.e., what's your country's, stature in global affairs. At the moment, Ghana's stature has been diminished over the years because of the activities of our politicians. So yes, he can actually say it, but I don't think that he can have a lot more impact as he would have if the country was on a very good footing, So yes, you would need, and he would need to really, of course, like he sounded, it's not only him, it had been said earlier, those countries that are actually pushing for, the reform of the UN must come together as a unified force, because individually, Ghana has no stand in terms of where we are now. I don't think we have that clout to call for reform. But if we come together as what they call countries calling for reform, we'll be able to do that. We'll be able to make an impact.
Well, politics is important, but even to get your voice heard also means that you need to be there. And the president decided to take the local politics global. And, well, before world leaders, he told them about the free SHS policy that his government was implementing in Ghana and how he hoped it would impact on the development of young people and economically.
We've just started the free senior high school program, which aims to guarantee secondary education for all of Ghana's children. This program will ensure that all our children will be educated to at least secondary level, and money, or the lack of it, will no longer mean a denial of education. This has already led to an increase of over 90,000 children who have entered secondary school this academic year, who would otherwise have dropped out at this stage. SDG 4, which aims at ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all, will be within our reach by the target date.
And that's the president. So we're taking our local issues to the global level and trying to tell the countries that we're doing what it matters most. For the president and his party, the free SHS policy was the fulcrum around which their campaign was.
Yeah, it was a flagship. I think it looks good on him because obviously we're talking about SDGs, you know, and SDGs is a global policy. So how do we fit, or how does he fit into that narrative? And that's what he's trying to say, that, you know, one of the SDGs is been implemented, or by implementing the free SHS, we'll be able to, you know, achieve, you know, some of the SDG, you know, what do you call policies. So it looks good on him on that. But to be fair, some of us obviously have positions, you know, of how the free SHS was rolled out. Obviously, he's not going to say that at the UN, you know, the limitations of it. Of course, some people would argue that it's too early. It's early days for us to talk about limitations or the kind of, you know, hidden issues that we've had. But the point is that we could have even resolved it. I think that it's a political expediency to implement a free SHS now. The reason being that if we are taking our time, we could have built a very strong database to understand who can pay and who cannot pay. Look, you don't have to have that wholesale rollout of a policy, because I keep saying that in countries where the middle class know their value, the presidency or the leader of the country does a rallying call to say the country is on its edge. We need you to shoulder this country to a position where everybody is okay, then we can reduce the burden. What does that mean? It means that you ask the middle class to pay a little bit more, all right, so that the very disadvantaged in society can benefit. And when the country is on a good footing, you can.
Well, Dr. Mensah, that's a bit controversial, well, especially when we know that, and you have written a book, Political Marketing and Management in Ghana.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you sold a certain message to the people.
Of course.
Even you said it was going to be free, totally free. Yeah. So if you now come back and change the narrative, well, that goes against your public rating.
Political parties are actually, or leaders are actually market-driven at the same time market-driven. All right. What I mean is that sometimes you drive the market, sometimes the market drives you, all right? So there are times where your policy could actually be that, you know, voters like consumers cannot always see the future. Sometimes we're limited in our future seeing. And that's why Henry Ford said if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, because at the time, horses were the only mode of transportation. Now, there are times where you can actually ask people and say, yes, you need this, but this is the state of the country. When I came in, we don't have the capacity to achieve that. Can I please ask some of you who can shoulder the country a little bit more, do a little bit more for this country? When we get there, we'll alleviate, all right? We saw Obama did that. Obama did that in 2008 when he said that America can no longer afford to ship works abroad. So everybody, those who have businesses that have shipped to Asia, have to bring the businesses back to America. They ask people to pay more in terms of taxes. people obliged, all right? Of course, there will be dissenting views, but the point is that you have to have a rallying call and ask people, or kind of implore people to pay a little bit more. But this is the case we didn't do it, because if we have to actually take time to build the structures, we probably may not see to its implemented. Somebody will come and implement it, and then it becomes a shared kind of policy. They don't want that. They want to do it. I think that it's political expediency, but it's not good for us. All right, that's my view, and I stand by it. All right, and I have a lot of people who actually agree with me on this. For me, it is fantastic. I mean, who doesn't like other people to rise up? And like I said, the values of the middle class is, if you look at your family, people who actually become in the society, you go back and then pick one or two people who are disadvantaged, and you try to raise them up by contributing to education, paying for their medicals. That is the value of a middle class. Why didn't the president call on the middle class of this country to not have this free, but allow other people to have it free? And then when things are okay, we can just roll everybody in. So that's my point.
What would have been the political cost?
Yeah.
For the president, for his party, for his campaign people, if he had changed the narrative to be what
it is strategy. You see, that's what I always feel that political parties must resort to strategists, must resort to strategies like political marketing strategists, which now we have quite a number of young people coming up as political marketing strategists. Ask people, what can they do? We can prepare the minds of the voters. You can always speak to people passionately. You remember those days, your mom will wake you up like 2 a.m. and then say, let me have a word with you. That is also possible. There are times where you can have a rallying call and tell the public that I did say this, but to be very honest with you, the coffers don't look good for us to do this. Can we have a little bit? Then you give justifications. Then you actually, but you see, political parties sometimes are afraid that opposition, would actually, kind of bite into it and then would actually run with it. No, people have conscience. If you are able to explain to people and persuade them, the opposition cannot make mincemeat out of it, because definitely people would actually say that you are being mischievous. You actually run the coffers low, and now you're actually arguing that this is not a way forward. I think people can stand by you, but sometimes we're afraid because we haven't actually taken time to research the system and to understand the psyche of the voter, and as a result, we just go, wholesale. I think we need to change that attitude. We have to employ strategy in everything. The strategy in the messaging, strategy in the campaigning, strategy in the policy formulation, strategy in everything. Even strategy in understanding the psyche of the voter. You can, all right? And then use that to propel your message. But if you don't do that, and then you want to change course, obviously people would actually lambast it to say you promised A, now you're in government and you're doing B. But if you really employ strategy, marketing research, intelligence, etc., and then you segment well, you'll be able to sell the message well, no matter what the message is.
Our demographics are changing.
Yeah.
And I just recall recently the former president, John Dramani Mahama, when he addressed, is it the inauguration of the ideological school of the party, said, well, the NDC was instrumental in taking people out of poverty because they always focus on the masses, etc. And when people get to that demographic barrier of middle class, then they want more. And then the ideologies of the NDC doesn't seem too appealing. Well, but it's debatable.
But he is right in the sense that, we have something called mobility, in sociology and other studies. When people, move upstage, their preferences change. So definitely, that's reality. So if somebody is poor or is disadvantaged, at that moment, they are likely to subscribe to social democratic, policies, and they're likely to subscribe to. When they come to own businesses, you don't expect them to behave the same way. Of course, now they own business. Now they're actually looking at tax havens. Now they're looking at tax reliefs. Now they're looking at certain favorable policies that can actually make their businesses sustain. So immediately there's a mobility in terms of social status. People's ideological positions change. But of course, that doesn't mean that you have to relent. You also have to reflect, with the changes of the voters, status. So you couldn't say that, well, we have a very broad base of disadvantaged people, and you wouldn't actually, or when they become middle class, it means that they've lost out of favor. No, they haven't lost out of favor. You have to strategize to reflect that particular middle class.
Right.
So I think that, yeah, he says that, but it's a defense, but it's not a good defense, I think.
And so then my next transition for the questioning is for the Fourth Republic. We've had the two main parties.
Yeah.
Of course, it depends on what they claim, what their ideologies are, etc. And they say they appeal to certain segments or demographics, etc. But would you say that people voted for, or voters gave their ballots or votes to the MPP more in the last election, just because they felt the MPP could address more of their concerns, or is also because maybe the changes in the demographics also meant that the other party in government, which claimed they had done so well, was not appealing enough?
Yeah, I think it's a good question you ask, because even in this book I address the voter, exactly, I address the voter mobility, exactly. Now, what happens is that, you know, when parties are in government, definitely they will falter, all right? And then the opposition would have more strength to argue their case out. I think that by and large, the Ghanaian voter is changing, and we keep saying there's a rhetoric, but it's true. You know, those days where we have segments, a voter demographic, say the poor people will vote left, the rich people will vote right, and then maybe certain professions, medical people will vote this way. I think there's an increased tendency for people to, you know, cross-vote. So there's a lot of bipartisan vote going on here. I don't agree that the two parties own 45% of the vote. No. I think that what we're seeing is a switching, you know, of people's vote, depending on the performance of one party. All right? So if they're very critical, and I think that I call on them to research more and look at the true voters of this, you know, of their parties are not 45%. When people become disappointed, either in government or in opposition, people could be disappointed in you in opposition because you're not articulating their concerns enough in order that the government will be pressured. And if you're in opposition and you're not able to articulate the issues, they will keep you in opposition. All right? And then if you're in government and your opposition is not strong, they will keep you in government because let me tell you, the politicians, neither left nor right, is seen as a good guy in Ghana or elsewhere. Every politician, the voter don't see them as a good guy. It's always about the good one out of the bad nuts, all right? So if you strategize well and you articulate the issues well, people will bring you out of opposition into government and then change the government into opposition, you know? So for me, I think that essentially we must understand that the voters are moving to the center, all right, where they are alternating government depending on the performances of, you know, whoever, whether in opposition or in government, and then, you know, they'll come into it. It is about the political parties trying to gauge the sentiment, gauging the psyche, gauging the behavior of the voter, and then be able to work it out and see whether they could actually. But what we see is that once a party is in a position, they go to sleep. And even when party is in government, they go to sleep. Because it's only those who are working in government do you see them working. Those in the parties will just be, you know, but you have a lot of work to do. You have what do you call public engagement to do, what we call, you know, town hall meetings, you know, surgeries and all that, talking to voters, even doing registration. You know, elsewhere, parties use the lean season, i.e. season of inactive, you know, political activities, to register more voters, to actually let them know, to do more discussions on policy, all right? Party itself can do more discussions on policy. Do you think the free HSH is really good for us? They could be engaging, you know, people to get their sentiment and feed that into policy. You know, we don't get that. Immediately they assume governance, the party itself go to sleep, and the government is working. It shouldn't be like that. Immediately they lose power. The party that was in government now in opposition, they go to sleep, waiting for what do you call the party conferences and things, just to start work. You can't do that.
Okay, so then that brings me to my point of, if we want the parties to be vibrant, how do we reconcile that with independent financing for the parties, whether it's going to be from the state, etc., to make the parties vibrant? And I'm asking this question based on what the NDC in opposition tried to do, because when they're in government, they didn't think of an ideological school, because perhaps maybe things were rosy, but now they see that they have to tend the tables and make sure they oil the grounds very well. So how do we reconcile that?
There are many
Funding-
ways. To be fair with NDC, maybe the school had been in the offing for some time. Maybe they've been, and then they come into power. So we can't speculate whether this is a new one or not. But the point is that funding is crucial, to political parties' activities. And there are many ways that people have actually talked about, how to fund it. One, whether we let a state fund or we put the funding in the hands of people. I love what, Professor Ninsen said one time I read. He says we have political entrepreneurs who actually push their money into, parties. And then, of course, if somebody's an entrepreneur, they put their money where their mouth is. You expect them to, kind of bite the biggest of the cake, all right? And that's exactly what we do. If we leave funding to the very few people, they would be expecting the very big part of the cake. So we probably want to democratize political funding by giving it into the hands of the people. And there are so many ways of doing that.
How?
Now, well, you have your base, you have your electoral base. If you can actually let them see genuinely that you're working for the benefit. And, in society, political parties work for the benefit of sections of society. Because if you belong to the left, you want the interest of the left to be protected. If you belong to the right, you want the interest of the right to be protected. Do the people of the left genuinely think that you are the flag bearer, the cup bearer of their interest? And do they genuinely think that when they give you the resources, you put it into good use? If you can demonstrate that, I have no doubt people will contribute. Because elsewhere, we have people giving big money, small money, to political parties to champion their interests. Why not in our case? Because we don't see the genuineness of political parties putting into good use, some of these resources. But yes, we need to take that funding aspect of the parties into the hands of the people, not the political entrepreneurs. And once we're able to do that, people, we can have a very functional political party and a very functional...
How can the talk of transparency in terms of public accountability of how they're funded, perhaps cure all the problems that businesses and individuals who sponsor political parties or even sectional populations who help political parties fund the activities not go through persecution, etc.
Yeah.
Because
of course,
it's a critical aspect.
I think that it's a reform. The EC, for example, and its codes of conduct or its guidelines. I don't think the EC guideline actually ask politicians or individual politicians to disclose where they got their money from. All right, I'm not sure about that. I think they're supposed to.
Well, they're supposed to publish.
Exactly.
But
so we must.
They don't. I'm not sure they publish everything.
No, I think we must, as one of the developments, we must seek to reform political funding, act and make sure that politicians can disclose or political parties can disclose where they get their funding, and in turn, those who actually fund the parties must also disclose, so that we could see who is funding.
Because in the US and elsewhere in Europe, etc.
Yeah, they do it.
So how can, let's say...
And there must be a cap.
Yes, how can, let's say, a business or an entrepreneur, let's say a business like MTN or somebody who leads a big conglomerate in Ghana, who is Ghanaian or not, say, I gave this to this cause, or I supported this candidate with this amount of money, and it's public. I give $10 million to this, I give $5 million to this, and it's public. And then let's say the party that you didn't give a lot more to wins, doesn't come to victimize you.
Well, I think that when the rules of engagement are clear, and I say the rules of engagement, including the practice of business within a country. I mean, if somebody decides to fund you, it's funding you for a purpose, all right? For example, maybe a particular policy to be to be reflected in there. People who actually fund what they call green policies, it's because they're looking for climate change. Tesla, for example, will fund any of the political parties that champions climate change because they want to move away.
The car maker?
Exactly, the car maker. So if you tie the funding to a cause and you say that, let's say, I'm actually giving the money to political party A because they actually champion a free SHS, and that's where my business policy is heading towards. How do we make education accessible?
But in Ghana or in Africa,
we can do
if
that.
the party that you funded, whether for a particular cause because they have a certain interest or not, if they don't win, your business is in trouble.
Yeah, but why should it be so? We're talking
But
about
that's the reality.
So we can change it. You know, we're talking about best practices. We come into the country, we say, oh, fantastic America, fantastic Europe. They were not this as it used to be. You know, they've actually progressed, they've developed. And that's why we need that conscience, that reform. We need to actually put structures in place and say that, well, the law courts work. If the law courts work, how would you say that I'm actually persecuting this particular individual because they funded Party B or Party A?
Well, they do it
so
legally.
They
use the law to strangle you.
So it must be a comprehensive, Just recently we had Kenya, the law court taking a very bold step, by actually going against the interest of a ruling government. That tells you that we can do it in this country. All right. So I think that there are so many things that we can do when we're talking about holistic development. All right. We must look into it comprehensively in our society. How do we make sure that things work without people feeling persecuted, without people feeling left out? I think that we must actually look into all these and make sure that this country works. Because look, if the political parties, the politicians will have the will to do the right thing, no doubt we will develop.
The political parties we've had in Ghana. In the fourth plug, we've had only the NDC and NPP come to power. The party, do they have brands? Have they built the brand?
Yeah. They have built brands. I mean, to be fair, if you say CPP,
and they have the brand loyalty.
Yeah, they have the loyalty. Only that they haven't actually built it. They haven't actually grown the loyalty over time. I'm sure you have core people who actually would definitely vote for CPP. PNC, they are core people. And if you mention CPP now, certain images come to mind, doesn't it? Yeah, you see Nkrumah, you see the cockerel, you see the red and white. Everything comes to mind when you say CPP. When you say, NDC, certain things come to mind. The same as when you say MPP. So surely they have the brand, but they haven't grown the brand to the 21st century brand, as we know them. You've got to actually be able to paint the brand not only to the logos and the aesthetics and things, but to certain policy positions, all right? And that's what they're lacking. I think that they haven't been able to, because if you say conservatives, you know what you get. You know that they are very, tax relievers. They will relieve your taxes, but they will also make sure that, you have individual liberties, you have certain business, agenda, fiscal policies, etc. When you say the Labour Party, you know what you get. You get social welfare, you get NHS, etc. That is where they have to move into. Apart from the aesthetics that actually describe the party, how do your name actually link to certain policy? And I think, President Kufuor did fantastically well on that, When he came into power, there's 5 building blocks of, mass transportation, capitation grant, NHS. Exactly. It was tied to him. And I think that it hadn't left him. Everybody knows that capitation grant is J. Kufuor. Everybody knows that mass transportation is J. Kufuor. Everybody knows that the repeal of the criminal libel law is J.H. Kufuor. That was fantastic, campaigning. And that brand has actually stuck with him. I think that the other parties must do more, or even current MPP administration must do more to link its brand to its particular, policy position, and perhaps Free SHS would do for them. And then also you can talk about, President Mahama and the infrastructure. It was crucial. The roads. Yeah. It can tie in with that.
You see circle.
Exactly. That's the thing. So they've got to.
You see circle in touch in there. So that's President Mahama.
That's right. And then also another part that you want to build is about linking your core voters to your party image. That's why when you say, for example, when you mention the Obama brand, everybody knows the young voters. All right, it comes to mind, etc. So you've got to also have that strategy to link the party's brand to a particular voter demographics. And then we say, yes, who does, the MPP represent in terms of demographics? Not about these tribal issues. Obviously, I always say that it is not a bad thing to actually, vote according to tribes, which is very controversial as well. But it is the reality of the day, So you've got to be able to build certain voter segment to your brand, so that immediately you mention that everybody knows the kind of voters actually come alongside you.
What the president has done now with the announcement of founders and non-founders and all that, Elsewhere, and I was just reading this morning, someplace, Donald Trump's rating had gone up by 40%, or was up to 40%, not by 40%. It's crucial for them. We don't have the ratings, and we don't use them very much.
Very soon we'll have them.
Okay, very soon. Yeah. But at the end of the day, give or take, you make an announcement like this, and you want to shift the dates, you want to recognize certain people in political history. Does it count against you in the long term, or doesn't? And how do we measure those?
Yeah, it depends on the psyche of the country. I don't think the country is prepared for such debates.
Okay.
You know, what is necessary for the country now is economics. You know, and I'm sure that they more than us know better. You know, that the country is in a bad shape. People's pockets are not that good. You know, a lot of people are actually crying about, you know, they're talking, not crying. It would be exaggeration to say they're crying, because the country is not that bad. You know, but I think a lot of people are talking about the fundamentals, all right? So when you shift the focus, and I think that the MPP's focus was very much on economics. That's why they won the election. You know, the election was very much hinged on, you know, the economy of this country. And Bawumia's side of the debate was massive, and everybody believed in him. I think NDC took it for granted by not responding to his 77 questions or whatever, you know, that he had. You know, I think that the whole campaign was hinged on economics. And in that sense, people would expect you to focus on that and to get the fundamentals right. Immediately you start changing the gear to party political, you know, traditional ideological debates, then you're actually losing focus. Then people say, well, it's not needed. And if you look at the trends, I mean, if you look at the Twitter feeds, the social media, whenever people have used funders or funders, whatever, the apostrophe S or apostrophe S after the S, you know, they put Nkrumah's image there. You can't fight it. You know, it will be difficult. So whatever agenda they might have, I don't want to speculate, but if they wanted to supplant, you know, maybe Nkrumah with JB, it would be unfortunate, because a lot of people think that Kufuor is the face, whether it's founders, whatever you put it.
Can it take something away from them?
Well, of course, it would take a lot of, you know, passion away from them, because people may think that they are deviating, you know, and I hope they don't push it, you know. I hope they don't push it. They leave it as one of the so-called, you know, trenches policies or whatever they want to do. But if they want to push it, I think that the society would push back on it, and it could actually affect their fortunes.
And now the NDC have waded into the debate. There's a march?
Yeah.
Solidarity?
There's...
Is it taking advantage of a certain position? Because if you look at the membership of the NDC, really, I mean, we've had transitions of politicians into the period of the PNDC, and so is a mishmash kind of, and a mix.
I think that the NDC wanted to, you know, cash in on the debate. Of course, no doubt they have shown demonstrable evidence that they, so to speak, they are Nkrumahs. I don't know whether Nkrumahs will agree that they are, but they have shown evidence. They have actually pushed for, you know, Nkrumah's birthday. They've gone to AU. You know, make sure that it's in there.
Well, hold your fire there. And so, Hannah Odami filed this report. Let's look at it, and then we'll come back and see whether really the NDC, are they Nkrumahs or they are Rawleyish, whatever it is that they are.
Proposal by the President of the Republic of Ghana for an ally to be sent to Parliament to change the Founders' Day from September 21 to August 4. The NDC says they will not allow this to happen. Here is Kwaku Anyideho. He's the Deputy General Secretary of the party.
On the 6th of March 1957, Osagifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah at the old polo grounds lowered the Union Jack of the British Crown Colony and hoisted the red, gold, green, and the black star flag of the Republic of Ghana, and we struck our national anthem for the first time. God bless our homeland, Ghana. Freedom! 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 60 years down the line, some surrogates of the imperialist forces want to obliterate the memory of Kwame Nkrumah. It will not happen. It will not happen. Nkrumah never dies.
For Professor Joshua Alabi, this is not the priority now for a country.
We cannot decide to rewrite history. I think that as a nation, we should leave this behind us and think of how we can emancipate our people, help our people, get the best for them. That is where our focus should be. Our focus should not be thinking of rewriting history. I don't think that's our focus now. We move beyond that. We all did this history in our class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4. You go all over the world, international books all over, it is written. So why are we as a people trying to rewrite history? I think that we should drop this. Is that we should drop this and move on. We shouldn't spend time on some of these things. Nkrumah is the founder of this country, known in Ghana, known in Africa, and this is known all over the world, right? So our focus now is when you win power, think of how you move another step. So another government comes and then moves to the next step. Not with debating who founded this country. It is written and it's written, and I think that we should drop it.
I also spoke to some party supporters as to why they decided to join this particular march.
NDC is still in town. We are not dead. You can see the crowd. I think you also saw the crowd. So if you think we are people that we don't feel the hardship now, will we come out? We are coming out for our people to know that we are in hardship. So they should come out. Let's vote Agenda 2020 so that we will elect JM back. People are crying, even at Makola, they were crying, JM bye, JM bye. Why are they doing so? Because they can't see what is going on. And we want JM to come back. No JM, no 2020.
So have you seen anything good the MPP has done since they came to power?
Anything good? In fact, I will not stand here and lie. No.
And make sure that we reorganize and motivate our branches. Inshallah 2020, with oneness, togetherness and unity, we shall win the elections.
My name is Hannah Odame for JoyNews.
Interesting there. So the NDC, what are they, Nkrumahs or they are of their own?
Yeah, for me, I think that, like you said, the larger part of the flock, I mean the NDC flock, people in NDC, the leadership are from Nkrumah's backgrounds. But I think there's a brand confusion, there's a blurring, because of the leadership. I mean, clearly, Jerry Rawlings is a major factor. And of course, for someone like Jerry Rawlings to head a party and for you to bring somebody else to be the leader or the signature of the party doesn't sound well. So I think that we need clarity from the leadership, especially from Jerry Rawlings, for example. Do they link to Nkrumahism or do they actually link to something else? If we can have that clarity, and I give you an example. When Professor Mills was there, NDC was very, very Nkrumahist. All right, you could see that. You could feel it. You could actually look at the kind of things that he did. But I don't think that NDC was very much Nkrumahist after Professor Mills. All right, so that tells you that the leadership has a lot to do with the brand identity, and whether CPP is also comfortable to allow NDC to claim Nkrumahism. I wouldn't have any problem with it because the parties of the left always have one anchor, and if you look at the history of political parties, especially of the left, they hold on to certain, social democratic or certain socialist, to kind of evolve themselves out. So you could have, Nkrumah as the anchor for almost every party of the left. I don't have a problem with that. But you have to carve your own characteristics, right? So CPP would say that they are the original or true Nkrumahs. NDC would say that they are the modernized Nkrumahs, So it depends on how you brand yourself. Exactly, contemporary Nkrumahs. I don't have a problem with it. They can carve that. But they need clarity. The top leadership of NDC.
Does it create, as in normal marketing, does it create a distortion?
It doesn't. If you do it well, it doesn't create distortion. I mean, you could have a market, and I'm sure that some of these, fast-moving consumer goods, you have different brands in there. All of them are able to catch, kind of couch their own niche and then make it sell. So it depends on how do you draw your Nkrumahism. What kind of brand or what brand of Nkrumahism do you have, you know, and how can you actually let the people see that difference between one Nkrumah's party and the other Nkrumah's party? It depends on branding, it depends on strategy.
I was reading something on social media, and we'll come to a question next on social media, but this one is about, well, we're talking about a certain generation, and they are in senior high school. But in 3 years, all the streams will be free, etc. And we're told that by 2020, those who make entry now will be 18 and they'll be voting, etc. Of course, it doesn't work that way.
I've heard that, but
because
that's very simplistic.
Because it depends on your experiences within SHS, and it can give you, it can turn you off.
So many factors come into play.
So at the end of the day, would you say the political parties, do they really segment the demographics?
They do, because there's a natural segmentation. I mean, obviously, God created us in segments. You have men and women, you have older people, you have younger people, etc. Exactly. So they would do segmentation on a very basic,
do they
you know,
do
on
it thoroughly,
on a very basic level.
Done elsewhere.
That's
the
the
best
point.
of data.
That's the point. You know, lifestyle. I'll give a typical example. During the elections, you see
the 2016 general
exactly. You see political parties having signboards of their candidates in every area. So you have Lagos area, you have the head of the let's say the head of Mahama, the head of Akufo-Addo planted there. You go to Choko, you have the same head of. You're technically saying the characteristics of Legon area and Choko are the same. You're wrong. The characteristics are not the same. So why do you plant the head of the? So
as a marketing person, just like you taught
I
me,
would segment.
I would have said that perhaps maybe the way you dress.
That's the thing.
Or the setting of the picture.
That's the thing. So
Choko will be different from
exactly. So you would say that perhaps in Legon area you have a lot more people who own businesses, small businesses. You have a lot more educational or academic, you know, people. You have a lot more people who are upmarket. So what do? Maybe you put on your flagship policy, all right, in a very big billboard, and they put it there. Now, once the person drives home and then he sees that, they go and search more information about it, all right? But you don't put the heads of the candidate across. And if you look at it, whenever there's the elections, you see the heads of the candidate across the country. You drive through and you'll be seeing the heads of Kwesindum throughout. You are saying that the characteristics or the demographic characteristics of the electorate are the same. They are not the same, of course. You know, so you need to do a lot more segmentation. And one of my students did resource allocation for political parties, and they realized that they are not judiciously using resources. Because if you're judiciously using resources, you realize that one segment, one constituency, needs more policy-directed billboard than the other. But of course, you could see also that the current, you know, election.
So you're saying, let's say people of Tepa Abotuasi, they always have a lot of problems with the voter leak, the boat accident, and things like that. And so it means the messaging on the billboards will have to change.
That's correct. You don't have to put the candidate head.
You don't go to one Newtown printing press and do 1,000 billboards.
That's right.
And so take 20 here,
you're wasting resources. Right. You have to identify
what
the
you're
key
talking
issues
about.
are. Of course,
with the training you have given me. All right. Now, we have to come to the last leg of our discussions. It's social media. You're my friend on all the social media handles, Facebook, Twitter, etc. And it can get controversial. Yeah. But how critical has social media become? And what role did it play in the last election?
Amazing. See, last election, you realized that NPP, you could sense, I have to speculate, that they didn't have enough resources as NDC. I think it's obvious. So I'm not sure they will be, you know, they will be offended by that, because the NDC obviously had a lot more resources than them. You could realize that the usual 3 months to election campaign intensity didn't happen for NPP. They waited until I think just about a month or so, but they extensively used social media, especially Facebook.
Did it matter?
It did, because you see, when they started using Facebook, it means that they can cut down on spending using traditional media. So whereas NDC was showing its muscle on TV, on radio, spending a lot of money, they never spent money. They were using, you know, Facebook to show where Akufo-Addo was going. And I think that was fantastic, you know, because if you don't have the money, why do you want to fight the big boys on TV? Because you deplete your resources. And you see, in political campaigning, you have what is called front-loading or back-loading. Sometimes you front-load because you want to kind of take your opposing party, you know, and run with them, whether they can run off resources. Or you backload, you wait until towards the election, and then you rank up, you know, your campaign activities. And that's exactly what NPP did, because they didn't have enough resources as NDC had, all right? And you could see that a lot of people were following them, and they were taking the campaign right down to the people, because who are the people on social media? The youth. the celebrities, etc. And people were sharing and sharing and sharing. Of course, NDC did the same. But if you look at NDC, they were very much on Twitter. You know, that is what you call, John was fantastically on Twitter. And then later on, he moved on to, you know, Facebook. I think it didn't help him very well in terms of the social media fight, because Twitter has its own demographics, and you know the Twitter demographics are a little bit elite, a little bit upmarket than the social media demographics. And that is where the segmentation come in. You look at where do you need most? Do you need more of elite, or do you need more of the grassroots, the more of the broad base? And then, you know, strategize, you know, on your messaging.
You're saying because our demographics have changed, they've only done a certain transition that now you're calling grassroots, and the grassroots necessarily may not be the stark illiterate.
No, of course
but
not.
Perhaps maybe semi-literate, or perhaps even literate people, but who are at the down ladder of the income bracket.
I lose it,
but they're on Facebook a lot.
That's right. I use it loosely because, and at every point in time, whether, you know, people have transitioned into another level, there will always be that you know, classes. You definitely will have a broad base of.
It means that our definition of grassroots will likely to change, in which
you
we're going to have economically empowered people who are grassroots.
That's right. Okay. Because you would always have it. I mean, the strategies of economy, you always have the top 1%, you always have the middle class, you always.
I see.
Even now, when you go to UK, they have something called the precariat, you know. The precariat. That is those who are definitely on the ground. You know, they have nothing, they sleep on the street, or, you know, whose situation are dire, if I should put it that way. All right, that's the precariat. So if you look at this, the segmentation or the segregation, or in a better word, you know, the segmentation of the classes. All right, there are people who are very down there, and they will always be there. That's how, you know, the society is. You know, so you've got to look at who do you really want in your campaign, who do you really need to convince, really need to attract, all right? And then you design your channels, you design your messages, you design your campaign, even the kind of where. And if you look at it, Roland, during the 2000 election, whenever Kufuor was in voter region, it was the wife who was speaking. It was either the wife or Major General Kwashiga, may he so rest in peace.
Major Kwashiga.
Major Kwashiga, yeah, sorry. So it was always him and Teresa who were speaking.
And you're saying that was strategy?
That was strategy. Because Teresa had been in voter region, you know, most part of her life. You know, she understands and speaks the language fluently. And that's why I said that voting according to tribal lines is not actually wrong. Because we first and foremost develop trust from identity.
So you're saying you're just appealing to demographics?
Of course, from identity. I mean,
so it's not tribalism at all?
No, it's a strategy. If, for example, if I meet you in town, all right, and I'm trying to look for direction, and I see a bunch of people, then I see you right there, what would I do? I'll run straight to you to ask you, because of familiarity, because, you know, you always want to appeal to the person you know. And that's the first level of trust, all right? Would you vote for someone who's contesting with your dad? Unless you absolutely don't believe in your dad before you say that, no, let me vote for that individual. So you always have people, you know, having trust in the person who's closer to them first before they come to the stranger. So it is up to you to strategize and say, what else can you say about this person who is very closer to this, you know, voter, in order that they can actually lose trust in them, in order for them to vote for me, you know? So it is all part of strategy, but because we don't spend time to strategize, we always say, oh, this group of people, they vote on tribalism. Absolutely not acceptable, absolutely untruth. It is because they find trust in the person who is closer to them, you know? And if you sit down and analyze and strategize, you can actually counter that effect.
Okay, so I have to say thank you for passing through.
Thank you,
again. His book is Political Marketing and Management in Ghana. You can get it on Amazon, a number of the outlets, of course, on the internet where they sell books. A New Architecture, Kobe Mensah, has great publication and write-ups from people like Abang Bagbing. I see a couple of them here. James Abugri. Kwesi Dateban, who taught me in business school. We also have Anas Sulemana, Trinibua Kodriap, Doc.
Professor. Nete and all those
We have
guys.
Professor
Great
Abu
guys.
Bagmin, Albert Ahinkain, and then Kobe Mensah himself. We have Ben Manate also here.
He's not Professor Nete.
Yeah, he's not professor.
Yeah.
Okay. Joyce Nyanzu is
Yeah, Joyce was she's an MPhil student. Now she's doing a PhD.
Oh, great.
Yeah, she was my student.
Who is Ibrahim Bedi?
Yeah, he's an accountant. You know, he's a fantastic guy in the accounting department, and he's now director of audits at the university. So, and you can get a lot more insights on political financing.
Yeah.
You know,
So
HR in politics.
is
and
this
all
your
those things.
first major personal publication?
That's correct. Yeah.
Right.
That is book. You know, I already have.
No,
book
not
chapters
your academic publications, but
Yeah,
this is-
there's a major book.
and looks solid. It will be very expensive to
The
buy.
first book on
because this is
political
not a
marketing
Newtown
in this
print.
country.
This is a London print.
The
Very
Fagrave Macmillan.
Yeah, and Palgrave,
Macmillan, yeah.
Macmillan.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great book.
Excellent.
All right.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Kobe Mensah,
Yes,
University
well
of Ghana Business School.
Excellent.
He-
Fantastic school.
Now, yes, it's a fantastic.
You've been there, so you know. You know what I mean.
Yes, I know now. And political marketing is important now. It will become more crucial. And so it means that you just need to know the nuances of marketing in itself.
I think the politicians have too much to do. They've got to let people strategize for that. That in itself creates jobs. We're talking about job creation. Why do you want to do everything? You know, leave that aspect of your...
Because I have a couple of MP friends. You tell them, can I come and do this for you?
That's
and
right. Media
they said
management.
by the time you
know,
see their
PR,
own, they are printing their own T-shirts. They're doing.
They don't have to. You know, they have to outsource that.
If
to
they
a
feel that
strategy.
they have to give you the money because you bring them.
No, it isn't. You know, and a lot of times I think it's about trust. You know, get some legal things
It's okay.
done.
Don't give all the filler here. So we'll see how that goes. But we hope that you've given enough education on how you were slapped.
For sure.
And by the police, and you know sometimes the
but
police.
they're
Sometimes you have to
redeeming
get bold on the road. The police just accost you, and because we're not knowledgeable in the law, so we just
But let me
them
say
go
there
out.
are fantastic guys as well.
Oh, I
you
know. I have a couple of friends.
Fantastic, yeah.
I have great friends who are
Yeah,
policemen.
yeah.
They do great job, and especially those who are always in my area.
If you're thinking and go,
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. Always
If you're,
mention it.
that's a shout out for it.
You see, yeah. Well, Dr. Kobe Mensah is with the University of Ghana Business School and has this great book, Political Marketing and Management in Ghana. Please go look out for it. And that's where we call it a morning on this very discussion. But